Hello and welcome to Wells Danny Says. My name is Danny. I am a music producer and sound engineer down here in Plymouth in southwest England, and I've been working with local bands and artists for the last 15 odd years. Now, long before I touched the mixing desk, I listened to a lot of chart pop music growing up in my younger childhood. How could you? It was the 1990s, everyone was listening to the radio, at least more commonly than they were now. Eventually, when I started going into my double-digit age, I started going into indie music, and still there was some pop music that was coming up every now and again that I recognized. One of those particular songs is one I want to talk about today. No Regrets by Robbie Williams was a song that, whilst it did stick out to me, and it was quite successful, it reached number 4 in the UK singles charts in winter 1998. No one ever really mentioned the fact that there were two particular singers who came on board to do backing vocals on it. Those two singers were Neil Tennant, you might know him, he's from a duo called the Pet Shop Boys that were big in the 1980s, and Neil Hannon of the Divine Comedy. It was only when I prepared for this video did I actually find out that they did actually get credited for it. Nice. Anyway, the song was produced by two producers, Steve Powers and Guy Chambers. Stephen Powers, by his birth name, was in the recent July edition of Sound on Sound. He had an article in there in a section called How I Got That Sound. He explained how he used tape loops to achieve the song's distinct drum sound. He explained the original demo was in halftime, but because we wanted to get it on the radio, it meant we, Robbie, Guy and Steve, had to get some doubles time stuff in there in order to get it in the charts, which I found quite interesting actually. Up until then, Robbie's albums, including the album this song came from, an album called I've Been Expecting You, was done to tape. There was Pro Tools rigs available at the time, but they would not have kept up with what tape could offer them. And it depended on the studio as well. But both this album and the previous album that Robbie brought out were all done completely to tape. Again, nowadays in software you can actually emulate tape and use time shifting methods to kind of shift things in terms of tempo, like halftime, double time and things like that. Steve Powers also mentioned in the article how he had used a reverse hi-hat, which I honestly thought was a tambourine. When you listen to it carefully right at the start of the song, you do think it's a tambourine, but it's not. Apparently it's a reverse hi-hat, which I didn't know about, which I found very interesting actually. He had to equalize a lot of the tape loops he was generating. Basically, he had to characterize the frequencies of those particular drum loops in order to make space for the kick drum, which I also found quite interesting from a production standpoint. Nowadays, on most of my mixes, I never really have to gut out even looped parts, really, in my experience, but obviously, given the limitations he was probably working under at the time, I found that quite interesting actually. The mention in the changes of tempo also brought, in my mind, a potential business aspect. It suggested to me that either the label, the producers were keeping a close eye on what was going on in the charts, what was popular, and they were trying to be inventive in terms of how they went about building the character for the song. Robbie would have come in with the raw basics for the song, but usually in my experience, producers kind of build the song up into what we hear on the radio and try to achieve a common vision between the producer and the artist. So reading about this song was actually quite interesting. It was a really good opportunity it happened literally by chance, just reading over lunch, and actually reading about this was an interesting change. I've been starting to read Sound on Sound and other magazines like that more frequently lately. And again, going forward, I hope to explore more aspects of music production, music itself, and what's going on in the general music world during the series. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe and drop a like or a comment. I'd love to hear your views. But in the meantime, stay tuned for episode 2 coming soon.